Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications and host of the Integrate and Ignite Marketing podcast. Join me and my guests, some of the world's top innovators, disruptors, and visionaries, as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies for scaling and growing your brand. Dr. Shyama Mathews is an OBGYN surgeon at Princeton Medical Health and a medical advisor for Playground and Perry. Join Shyama and me as we ask the question, why is it that some successful companies have advisors while others depend solely on the expertise of their leaders? Shyama delves into the challenges of reaching and engaging physicians, one of the most difficult markets to penetrate. She and I also explore the best marketing approaches to initiate conversations with those hard to find and hard to engage with physicians and discuss the value of advisors in understanding and deploying successful go-to-market strategies. We will also talk about the role of advisors in successful companies in industries such as engineering, tech, and medical devices, how to find passionate advisors, how to create a persona to attract medical clients, the importance of balancing motivation and information in technical industries and messaging, and her recommendations for presenting scientific data to investors. And don't forget to check out the most recent issue of the Home of the Brave newsletter on LinkedIn. Just like this episode, it's full of inspiration and a ton of ideas to take back to your desk today that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how. Welcome to the show, Shyama. Welcome to the Integrate and Ignite podcast. I am so excited to have Shyama Mathews join the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you.
Well, I am so excited to get into the advisory role that so many companies need. You know, we're going to focus in today on medical and bioscience, medical device, all that sort of stuff. But it really does apply for any advisory role for a startup, Series A, Series B company that's going after funding. There are all sorts of reasons to have advisors on a board. Before we get there, before we dive in, tell us a little bit more about your background because, oh my goodness, you are impressive.
Thank you, Lori. So I am a board certified gynecologist. I'm a minimally invasive GYN surgeon. I'm also a certified menopause specialist. And in active clinical practice at the moment. So the advisory roles I've taken have really kind of grown out of my own practice and the things that I'm passionate about.
You know, it's so interesting to me because there's so much that goes into becoming a doctor and loving it, being very, very well known, nationally known in your field, and then taking that expertise and wanting to be able to share it in the founder, startup, visionary, disruptor, innovator, community. At what point in your career did you say, you know what, I've got a lot to share. I want to be able to share my expertise, even if it isn't as vertical as what you practice with other companies. Was there an aha moment for you, or did it just kind of land in your lap?
It was a little bit of both. I found that I really enjoyed talking about these topics. And one of the things I enjoyed was education. I spend a lot of time with my patients. I get excited over, dinner conversations with friends. So all these kinds of things kind of made it apparent that I really enjoyed spending time on that piece of it. And I think that's where it sort of transitioned into being able to help founders of companies and other areas, startups particularly in these fields.
Prior to the show, I was doing some research, and there are definitely successful companies out there that do have advisory roles and some that don't. And really the common thread for those that don't is the expertise at the helm of the individual that has hired the C-suite. A lot of times, if it's an engineering or a tech product, typically that founder is the engineer and they've got really good insight. They're going to be looking for maybe marketing roles on the board, advisory roles, chief revenue officer, that sort of stuff. But in medical device, I really do think it's a little different. It's quite often that a physician may start the company, but outside of that, the business acumen and stuff like that is so imperative and important. And that is the sort of line in the sand, I think, when it comes to deciding whether or not you need or don't need an advisor. What do you say about the need for advisors in any startup role?
I agree with you. I think it does start with where the founder in the suite is coming from. If they are within the field and they can speak to sort of the practical use of the products that they're behind, absolutely, they understand how it's going to impact the field and be able to progress where it's innovative and different from what's available out there. In medicine, there are a lot more nuances sometimes that aren't appreciated necessarily from the business aspect or the marketing aspect. So it's helpful to have somebody that is actually in the practical field or had experience in it to be able to guide some of those conversations. And it can start very early on from the development of the product or in the sort of fine tuning or maybe even further iterations or how do we improve upon it, all the way to marketing and sales. How do we really bring this to the forefront of what is being used and sort of the go-to product in a particular field?
Where is a typical entry point for a medical advisor? Is it usually too early, too late, or
I don't really think there is a wrong time,
really?
honestly.
Yeah.
Ideally, if it's something new, and again, if the company doesn't really have that in directly to the field, then early on is better, right? Because it's going to help with development. It's going to help with how the language around even that initial marketing and pitches for funding, et cetera, go. Later on, again, it could be a matter of fine tuning. How do we make it more accessible? How do we get the physician leaders in the field on board, right? Having
Hmm.
somebody who can speak their language, speak to how this has changed their own practice is often very helpful to
Right.
help navigate that.
You just define really the role of a medical advisor in many, many, many different aspects. How often do you see the marketing team, once they're hired, really relying or not relying on the medical advisor? And what advice do you have for marketing leaders of, it doesn't matter what stage of a medical device or bioscience company you might have? What advice do you have for those marketing leaders?
So I think what's really important, especially right now, where misinformation and information is really a high point in discussion, whether it's your marketing tools or social media, or if it's press releases, or it's, going out to any kind of media source, you want to make sure what you're saying about your products are accurate,
Right.
that people are very interested in the facts. So you can't be making blanket sort of pretty statements that don't have a lot of content. So having an advisor that's going to really respond back to what you're trying to say. What are you trying to put out there? Do you have the data to back it? Can you say that confidently because there is data to support it? That really makes a difference, I think, in the quality of a product and how well it's adopted because you have that sort of strong foundation to what's
Right.
being said in the media, right? So having someone play that back to you is really good.
And I think the data is something that is really, really important from a retention, from a marketing standpoint, too. People remember numbers. And quite frankly, as investors, the numbers really are very, very important because they're able to really take a look at, okay, is there elasticity for this? Is there a real need for this? What is the potential market growth? All these sort of components that help them decide whether or not this is worth an investment. If we go back to what you said about numbers, we look at it from a marketing standpoint, as I said, as memorability. People really remember numbers far more quickly than they remember a sentence of copy. For whatever reason, the brain is able to retain that better. And there's a cross section, though, between motivating
Right.
and really getting an audience to quickly understand the importance of it, and then just putting information out there that is not motivational. And a lot of times we face this with any technical product, medical or non-medical. the motivation gets stripped away. And typically it gets stripped away due to FDA regulations
Right.
and a lot of other reasons. Talk to us a little bit about how marketers can navigate those kind of issues.
So you're correct. I mean, again, there's a lot of things that can and can't be said. There's a lot of red tape around it that in general you have to be very careful about. Um, the way to navigate that, and that I think is where having an advisor that's in the field, who's again interested, passionate about the product, sees how it can impact, the patients, the clients that need it, right? Whether it's a physician client or patients, depending on the type of medical product it is, seeing how that would impact and change the use and the field in general. That's the way to build in that motivation, right?
Right.
You can use those numbers. You're right. Numbers do stick out, particularly in the science field as well, right? We cling to those numbers as well.
Hmm.
But not just that, knowing that it's impactful, that it's going to make a change. It gives you another tool in your toolbox. It's going to improve your ability to function, and the ability of the product or work that you're doing is going to get better by employing this. Seeing that connection coming from, sort of the wording and practical experience of an advisor, I think is really helpful.
It's as you're explaining this, I'm giggling a little bit inside. We have dozens of medical device and bioscience companies that are currently on the roster and that we've worked with over 43 years. And one discussion that we always have is how we get the physician mindset to change.
Hmm.
There are early adopter mindsets out there that really gravitate toward, and it's not a matter of what is best for the patient, but they gravitate towards change and the evolution of medicine and technology and how it's impacting the field. And then there are those that are just set in their way. And it's really, really hard to get them to adopt the newness because the old way of doing something is what they know best. What advice do you have for marketers in ways they can create and capitalize on that
Right.
early adopter mindset?
Identify your early adopters.
Yeah.
Find out the people that are passionate about this, interested in it, talking about it, even just on the education side, because
Hmm.
they're the ones that are looking for innovation, right? They're looking for change. What they have available to them is not enough.
Right.
So they are ready to try the new thing and then actually see how it impacts their group, their population. And then
Hmm.
they're able to speak to their peers about it, right? So I've done education where it's come to pharmaceuticals and other products as well. And really, it wasn't about telling them you should change everything that you're doing. Drop what you've known for 20, 30 years of practice and start doing this. It
Hmm.
was more, hey, here's another approach. This is what's changed in the last 10 years because of all this research that we have. Here's another tool in your toolbox that when you've hit a roadblock and you feel like you can't get any further with the treatments that you've had at your disposal, here's another approach to this and how you can weave that into your existing practice. And I
Right.
think that comes across a lot less aggressive and a lot less shaming in some ways
Hmm.
about what they're doing, and also respectful, right? They
Right.
do have experience. It's not something that needs to be downtrodden because it's not the newest and greatest and latest, but you
Yeah.
can show them how they can use it. And not only that, I've often created relationships in the sense that if they're not comfortable doing it, at least they know where to bring those next level patients, those next level clients that are like, you know what, maybe not me, but I know who's doing this and I can
Right.
send someone that way. And guess what? People like that. People
Yeah.
like that you're able to direct them in a way that is more for their good, right? It's sort of there's an altruistic side to it, but there's also a maybe this will work for them, and we can really kind of support the growth.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting as we have worked through audience segmentation models in the physician market in particular. The assumption going in is that an early adopter mindset might be age banded. What
hmm
we have found is completely opposite.
hmm
That in some situations, it's the sort of education they got and how novel the tech space was within that either teaching hospital, the residency, or even where they started out, versus the aspect of that true mindset that is just, I always want to be relevant. And what do you have to say regarding how we can get to those behaviors, or what we are talking about,
Right.
instead of the typical, the assumption that younger people are just going to be more, have more elasticity to want to be
Right.
able to adopt some of these new novel approaches.
I agree with you. I think actually what it shouldn't be age related at all. It should
Mhm.
be honestly experience related, and that doesn't
Mm.
necessarily come with age. You can identify people that are masters in their field. They're the ones that do this, what you're trying to fix, this field, this is what they do best. It's
Right.
what they've really, spent their time, they've developed their practice around it. It's their focus. They're not general and necessarily all kind of blanket in their field as far as what they're doing. They're really kind of honing their skill into something that they are really passionate and interested in. And you can find those people, and that those are the physicians or advisors that are going to be able to say, yeah, I like the idea behind this. Let me see and tell you how that could help or couldn't help. Where are you missing? Like, where are you dropping the ball? What kind of changes or innovations would help the growth of the product, right? They're going to be able to give, there's going to be a give and take there as well, which can
Mhm.
only improve what you're working on.
Yeah. I love all these insights that you're sharing with us. They truly are amazing. Let's take a step back and really kind of break down how companies can best utilize advisors based on the stage that they're in. So very early stage, the product still might just be in concept form.
Mhm.
They've proven the ability for scientifically something to work,
Mhm.
but they're going after funding, and they need to achieve the funding in order to go into trials or whatever it might be.
Right.
So in that kind of a situation, we're really talking about how do we entice and excite investors.
Right.
And when we are developing an investor profile for our clients, a pitch deck, whatever it might be, we always ask the client to kind of start out and let us know what they feel the audience needs. And we end up with 100 pages of scientific data that
Mhm.
the average investor is not going to understand at all. We also know that most pitches are 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And if you're lucky enough, you might get another 10 for questions if you've done a good job with the pitch. How have you advised the companies that you've worked with on what information should be in a pitch?
So, as you touched on this earlier, right? You want to identify that there's a need in the market for the change that they're suggesting, and that there's room for growth and development. What's the trajectory, right? That's the reason to invest in something like this.
Right.
So, paring down all the science and all the numbers and data down to that personal aspect of how does it work on the ground, right? How does it work for the physicians that need that device in order to, improve upon their surgical outcomes, or the patient that needs it in order to, improve upon their health? How does that actually pare down to that point and
Right.
show how what is there existing, what are the limitations of what there is existing, and then be able to say this is where there's room for improvement, right? And a physician or a medical advisor within the field who's actually seen what's available and used what's available is really going to be able to speak to that, and also again guide you as far as how you can even maybe make that concept grow in certain directions versus others.
Mhm.
Give you some ideas and concepts as far as how that's going to have a better trajectory if you focus on this part of it versus another aspect of it that may be less marketable or less usable by the user friendly.
Right.
So really identifying those kinds of on the ground level, like where does it actually touch the people that are going to be using it, paring it down to that.
And do you find yourself getting involved in the pitch in front of an audience very often?
I actually, in my roles, I haven't been that often in the role of giving the pitch, except in the later stages. So not in the investor stages, I haven't been in, but more so in, again, developing a little bit of that content for the statements that they're making. What are they talking
Mhm.
about? Bringing that sort of personal experience piece of it, so that that can be kind of developed into the pitch as well.
Right. So early stage, product viability, product elasticity, ability for growth, all those data points that become very, very important. A company has just gotten an $8 billion or $8 million tranche. And that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Wonderful, right?
And they are ready to start not just scaling, but really, the trial piece of things, the validity, all those sort of components. How does your advisory role change from that very early stage to, okay, we've got some money, and how are you digging in and helping?
So that could be a variety of different ways, and I think that also depends on the background of the advisor. It could be the matter of how are these trials and studies being constructed? To what level of data are you going after? Is it surveys? Is it testimonials? Is it real data with trials and patients set up with double blinded and placebos and things of that nature? Is it, as far as devices go, is it that you have a prototype that someone's actually trying, right? So
Mhm.
depending on the angle at which you're trying to develop these things, I feel like it really, that also kind of depends on the advisor's background, but weighing in at that level as well, again with their personal kind of practical experience.
That's great. And then commercialization would be that next level,
Right.
that next tranche, and you're really moving into getting this product in the marketplace. And to me, that's where the secret sauce really, really comes in,
Yeah.
because at that stage, you brought it up earlier, you're aligning sales and marketing along with the efficacy of the product in the marketplace, and all those things must align in a very, very strong way. Talk to us about how you've advised companies in that stage.
So that too comes to, again, whether it's a surgical platform, whether it's a pharmaceutical, whether it's a product that a patient will use, like outside of even like the medical sphere. It's really about how it comes in line with what your target audience is trying to achieve, right? So
Mhm.
whether it's better, again, better outcomes, better results, improved health, whatever metric that you're looking at, being able to show that this is where it fits into your current practice. And it might just be showing this is the toe in, this is where you get it in. And if you are able to introduce where that fits, if it truly is a good product, that's how you sway, right? Because they're
Right,
going to shift towards it once you just need to get them to use it. You got to get them to try it. And
right,
they're not going to be willing to try it unless they know where does it fit into their current practice. And so talking to someone that's able to kind of guide them in that decision making, make them feel a little more comfortable about the pros and cons of it and being realistic about it. There may be some
right,
downsides, but how do you address that? How do you counsel patients or, again, physicians on how they use it? How do they troubleshoot some of those things? So being real about it kind of helps because, again, it doesn't come across as false,
yeah,
and it doesn't come across as salesy when it's your colleague who's been in the trenches with you and doing those, using these products, how it, the ups and downs of it, who does it work for, who doesn't it, in what
right,
kind of cases would this medical device be perfect for, but I wouldn't really use it for X, Y, and Z. That's
right.
real, right?
It is real, and I think that is a very, very important aspect of the advisory role, and back to segmentation and really helping the brand understand what the best go-to-market approach is, which I believe is one of the most difficult markets in the world, is getting to physicians
Mhm.
and getting the door open with those physicians. And we talk about this quite often. We've read many, many scholarly articles on, what is the best approach to get in front of people that are so busy. They're working 12, 14, 16-hour days. How do you impact them? How do you get in front of them? From your POV, what are some of the best marketing approaches to getting to the point of having a conversation?
So it's that can definitely be a challenge. It's interesting because as somebody who's open to having those conversations and being able to say to a rep from whatever field, yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes of my time, give me your pitch,
Yeah,
to them then turning around and saying, how do I get to my colleagues the way that I've been able to sit down with you? And sometimes it takes your advisor to step in. It may
mm,
be a, hey, would you like to talk to physician so and so? Because they'll get on the phone with you for 10 minutes and at least tell you why this is worth your time.
right,
Something of that nature. Again, leading with this is where it fits in your practice and not making it seem like you should drop everything you're doing and pivot to this without any real backing behind it. Kind of leading with those pieces of information, I think, is the most helpful. And again, mindful of time. Time is
right.
really a constraint.
It's so interesting. We're debating right now, um, on a couple of our clients, as to whether or not, eh, and it's a very, very, very broad spectrum of patients. Are we better off going to a hospital system and talking to the chief medical officer
Mhm.
and getting him to adopt it first, and then making sure that that moves downstream to all the physicians on staff? Or are we better to piecemeal? Is it, bottom up or top down? What are
Right.
you seeing, as far as those approaches right now?
Oh, it really depends on the population. So, there are some, particularly surgeons, that are very set in their ways. I can say that for myself,
Yep,
being one.
we would
And
agree, by the way.
so, when something comes down the line and
I
it's like,
say that
oh,
with
we
all
are
the love in
doing,
the world, by the way.
I'm being honest, I admit it, right?
Yeah.
I'm more skeptical that it's something that they're taking on and like kind of delivering to everyone downstream,
Mhm.
as opposed to, hey, this is something that so and so is trying, right? So if I'm
Right.
bringing something saying, I'm trying something, you should check it out. I feel like often, depending on the mindset, it's often better. Other ways to reach certain groups, I would say, are things like conferences,
Right.
educational opportunities. Because if you think about it, that's when we're going in with more open minds, right? We're
Mhm.
there to absorb.
You're there to
So
learn and know what's next.
exactly. So
Yeah.
those are the people too that are going to be looking around, especially at the exhibition areas and opportunities to be able to kind of trial and talk. And that's another great way to make a connection that then you carry
Mhm.
back to your local representative and are able to continue that conversation.
Right.
I think that's a great outlet. But yeah, I would say more so again, my point of view, my personal experience is I like to be the one that has kind of hands-on access and then go from there.
We just need to create a persona of you. For any medical, client that we have, because you're the one with the mindset and everything. Back to, conferences. 75% of people, no matter the market, pre-plan who they're gonna see on the trade show floor prior to a show.
Sure.
That is where, the sales team, the rep team, whatever it might be, getting a hold of these individuals is absolutely paramount. But marketing really needs to back them up as well. Is there any sort of marketing that you feel is very compelling? And we can just talk tactics for a minute here as
Sure.
well, that help you either understand this is something I want to learn more about, or say, not quite.
So you're correct. It's like anything, right? You're trying to catch someone's eye, you're trying to catch someone's interest. You want them to stop and actually listen for a few minutes.
Mhm.
So just in general, placement, right? Geography of where you are on the floor. Are you near something that you know is very popular and the hot ticket? What does it look like at the stand? Who's standing there and how welcoming and open they are? Is there something hands-on? We love
Mhm.
hands-on, right? Physicians are really, we work with our hands, not just surgeons. So is there something that we can actually tactile feel, samples, or a device that we can actually kind of feel how that works in our hands? Is there videos? Is there something that we can see how this
Mhm.
product is meant to work? Is there simulation? Right? We love
Right.
simulation. Things of that nature really capture our imagination, and we're able to see how this. Okay, I could see how this could work. Even before the idea of dollar signs, is it practical? Is it, is this really going to be something I can adapt or afford or my system will get behind? even before all of that is capturing that interest.
Right. This is off but on topic. One barrier to entry is insurance.
Mhm.
And how important are insurance code approvals at that stage to you versus you having the ability to go to your CMO or to go to your practice lead and say, you know what, we need to fight for this?
Oof, that's tough. And I think that really depends on the individual and where they lie in
Right.
um, that structure, in that hierarchy. Um, Regardless of where I've been and how much volume and work I've done and surgically, I'm still cognizant of the insurance code. Where
Right.
is it? And actually, it's interesting. Representatives have been very um, again, respectful of my time. I remember I went to a conference, there was something that I was so excited about. I came back, I got the number of the local rep, called him, and he was like, "Oh, Dr. Mathews, you've been on my radar. I just know that insurance companies aren't covering it over there yet. So
Ugh.
don't worry, as soon as they do, we'll be over there," because they know they've tested that market and they know there's no chance that any of the hospital systems will get behind it because again, it's a financial investment for them, right?
Right.
Whereas if it is something that you can show there's a real need for this in the community, then that's something that you could potentially build upon. And unfortunately, in medicine, there's also hierarchies there. I'm in
Hmm.
women's health. So
Yep.
you have to know where that lies in the hierarchy,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of an uphill battle sometimes, even though it shouldn't be. So again, that's something to keep in mind.
Who is making the biggest impact there? Is it the medical device company or that's fighting for it? Or is that again a bottom-up approach with the physician saying, United Healthcare, you've got to start approving this.
I think it's a little bit of both. Um, Anytime those battles come about, it's about having volume
Mm.
and people to actually fight that, right? How many
Right,
physicians really have the time to take that on as a battle?
right,
But if you're willing to have somebody as part of your development, a prior authorization team, a team that's going to be the ones that fights the appeal and submits the documentations, working on the physician's behalf, that's a lot easier for us to get behind
right.
because we don't have the time most of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're still having conversations about how COVID has changed the way that reps can sell to
Mhm.
physicians all across the world. What, from your point of view, changed the most during that time? How did it positively impact your ability to learn about new products and solutions? And then what, if anything, has really fallen back to pre-COVID as far as the ability to get in front of a physician?
So you're right. I feel like COVID was a convenient excuse to close doors, right?
Yep.
And we could just kind of we everybody was just too focused on what else was going on. So getting that door open again has definitely been a challenge. So that in-person, exchange, right, of a one-on-one kind of conversation was difficult. So in some ways, having the convenience to be able to say we have the platforms now to do a virtual meeting and be kind
Hmm.
of, on our feet quick about it. I can talk to you between cases or patients when you wrap up at the end of the day, or 15 minutes in the morning because we can jump on a Zoom call or something like that, just to again have a little bit more reach. But then there is something to be said about that personal interaction and really kind of getting in front of somebody, and you get a better sense of a person that way too. So
Right.
both of those things I feel like I mean, that's true in any field, and very much so I think in this for medical device and medical advising.
It's interesting. The days of providing the break room with food, with
Hmm.
lunch,
Hmm.
with sales kits, from what I understand, have really been pushed aside.
Yeah.
How are sales reps making up for that loss of novelty selling, of just, awareness?
Right. Um, I feel like in many realms, this is one of those things where the pendulum swung a little too far in one direction, and now it's sort of trying to recalibrate, where it used to be a lot of, novelty items and whining and dining, et cetera. And again, it kind of loses authenticity when you get to that point, right?
Right.
I think now, actually, as nice as it used to be to have a lunch in the office, like, it's not necessary. Most of us don't have the time for that. And we can actually kind of cut that down and just sort of be direct. Sure, bring a box of Joe. My staff
Right.
love it, right? But you can really kind of focus more on just, here's the contents, here's what we have. Being able to maybe put some of that budget into things like samples for patients or
Hmm.
patient information, or putting it towards, again, insurance navigation, or discount codes, or whatever it might be that would benefit the end user more. I think, in general, that's more appreciated in the long run.
Yeah. So this is often left field as well. Um, I have been doing a lot of reading surrounding the FDA and the regulations that they're putting in place right now regarding the tech aspect
Hmm.
of a medical product. So if there's a pacemaker and a company is providing monitoring to a physician group or millions of physician groups out there, the FDA now wants to make sure about the cybersecurity aspect
Hmm.
of that pacemaker, from not only a, you know, HIPAA standpoint, but terrorism standpoint.
Hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about how you are navigating that as a physician, and then how you are advising these startup companies on that very serious aspect of regulation.
It's a I mean, I think it's relevant in every field right now, right? It's one of those things that it's sort of this big mountain that we're all trying to figure out how to climb. HIPAA is huge. I mean, everything from our day to day using electronic medical records, even that, in again, from the cybersecurity and defense and perspective, it's kind of scary what's available,
Yeah,
right? And
it
what we're
is.
collecting. So yeah, down to the point of devices, we're starting to, I think, be a little bit more cognizant of how far-reaching our tech is, and how vulnerable that makes us. So honestly, I mean, in the grand scheme of safety, it's probably not a bad thing to be a little bit more cognizant of. And I think the field grew so quickly that agencies like the FDA didn't really know how to keep up, and they're just
Right.
trying to figure it out now. And I think a lot of what's coming out of it is them figuring out what's the best way to protect and navigate this, and put certain protections in place. So I feel like that's going to be changing a lot in the
Mhm.
coming years, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I had a breakfast with a friend recently, and he was talking about uh, they are a tech company that happens to service many, many different industries, and they're, you know, grasping straws right now to figure out how they can meet not just cybersecurity regulations, but all these new FDA regulations, and make sure that not only are they compliant, but they're really doing the entire market, that they're providing safety for the entire market.
Right.
It's a big discussion. As we are closing out on our conversation today, I've just got a couple more questions for you. How can founders find the right advisor? So there are a lot of options out there. And what advice do you have for them as they interview, as they reach out
Right.
and finally make a decision between three different ones, perhaps?
Right. I think, again, it's one of those things where it's a bit sometimes biased, because the people that come forward are the ones that want to do these kind of things, right?
Right.
If I'm kind of tied into a consulting agency already, you're going to be able to kind of look through that pool of applicants. If you're looking for something more innovative or more new, I would say look at education, and social media
Mm.
allows that, right? Social media allows for you to see who has a reach, who has a
Right.
presence, who's really talking about these things. So that's one way to get somebody maybe that's sort of newer, and again, passionate and interested in that education piece. And then, as far as people that are sort of comfortable in this space already, again, if you need somebody a little more established, then looking through those kind of consulting firms to find a good fit. One, it's
Mhm.
how you exchange any ideas, and in that initial kind of discussion. And then two is their area of expertise. Does it really align with what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, that's great. Any final insights and pearls of wisdom for people listening today?
I would just say, physicians, medical professionals, we really did go into this with an area of that altruism, right? We want to do good. Outcomes are important. It's important that people are getting better because of what we're offering. So really knowing how what you're building or developing can align with that is really how you're going to connect with these advisors and also then ultimately do better in that field.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, Shama, I've so enjoyed your insights today. They've been absolutely amazing. And I'm just so impressed. You are an incredible leader. You've got the founder mentality. You're changing the way you practice, and based on all these incredible tech enhancements. And we really appreciate your wisdom today. Thank you so much for your appearance on the Integrate and Ignite podcast.
Thank you, Lori. It's been a pleasure.
This episode is complete. Head over to avocetcommunications.com for more ways to scale and grow your business. And be sure to tune in regularly for insights and motivation with host Lori Jones and her guests on the Integrate and Ignite Marketing Podcast.